Alberta government, Lori Andriachuk, the Human Rights Commissioner, ordered Stephen Bazan, Christian pastor, never to criticize gays again, even in private emails. Even in private emails for the rest of his life. And it's worse than that. He has to write a public renunciation of his views and publish that public renunciation in the Red Deer Advocate. You know where they did that? In Mao's great leap forward in the Cultural Revolution in Communist China, where they had people issue fake self-confessions, self-condemnations, and publicly say, I'm a criminal, I'm a capitalist running dog, even if they weren't. And the mob would jeer. That's what the Alberta government, that's what, quote, conservative Premier Ed Stelmach is presiding over. This kookiness is not just a left coast thing, Rob. It's not just, big shots like Maclean's magazine that could probably afford fancy lawyers. This is about the little guy, too, a pastor, and maybe you disagree with him on gay rights. That's not the point. The point is it's his religious belief, and he has just been ordered by Ed Stelmach's patronage appointee, Lori Andriachuk, never to criticize gays again, including in public sermons. And he has to publicly renounce his religious faith in the Red Deer Advocate. Do you think I'm making this up, Rob?
I wish you were. I wish you were.
Not just insane. It is positively evil.
Well, one could also point out that, Mohammed El-Masri himself was described homosexuality as something that is or ought to be forbidden.
You know what? And
ironically enough.
And we can have a debate about that. We can have a debate about all these issues. We can even have a debate about racism. And I'm the kind of guy who says it's okay, and I'm Jewish myself, it's okay for him to hate Jews. You can't pass a law causing people to like each other. You can pass a law saying you can't hurt each other, you can't conspire to kill, you can't incite a riot, you can't use words to plan crimes or to utter death threats. There are some legitimate limits on words, Rob. We talked about defamation earlier, but those are real crimes. What we're talking about here is thought crimes, and it's such a vague law that anything could theoretically be trapped. So as soon as you're charged, you are guilty because there are no defenses to it, as I pointed out. So really, it's all about who these political activists in these human rights commissions choose to target. And as I think you and I have discussed before, the Canadian Human Rights Commission, that's the federal one, has a 100% conviction rate under their identical section of hate speech. Why? Because truth is not a defense, Rob. Fair comment is not a defense. And so as soon as you're charged, of course you're guilty, because of course what you say could expose someone to hurt feelings. That's the test now. What bugs me the most about all this, Rob, is that they're called human rights commissions, and that is so ridiculous because they are anti-human rights commissions. They're destroying real human rights, like the rights to free speech, and freedom of religion, and freedom of association, and property rights.
And presumption of innocence.
They're replacing them with fake rights, like the right not to be offended, or the right not to have jokes told that you don't find funny. This is happening in Canada. It's not just those wacky Vancouverites. It happened in Alberta last week, and it's a shame. And Rob, God bless you for fighting this fight. You've been on this file for months, and I think you got to stay on it until we correct it in this province too. And I'm not talking about myself now. I can take care of myself, Rob. You know that. But how about that poor Christian pastor? He doesn't have, he's not a big shot. He can't get on the radio. He doesn't have big shot lawyers defending him. And now he's been ordered to publicly recant his religion. It's for him, Rob. Ignore me. Forget about me. Forget about Mark Stein. He can take care of himself. Rogers can take care of itself. What about this Christian pastor in Calgary last week?
Now, recapping the week that was in Vancouver, this Human Rights Tribunal hearing into Maclean's magazine, and Mark Stein looking ahead to what's going to happen. In fact, what has just recently happened here in Alberta, speaking with Ezra Levant, much more at EzraLevant.com. Back to Maclean's for a second here, Ezra. I mean, the Canadian Islamic Congress, their case seemed to be so weak, but as we've said, that probably won't matter. Do you anticipate a conviction here? And let's talk a bit about why it seems Maclean's is hoping for that.
Well, as I mentioned, Maclean's did not call any witnesses because it regards this entire process as illegitimate, and it knows that to be accused is to be convicted. It's like the witch trials of Salem. There really isn't any way to survive, because if you drown, well, I guess she wasn't a witch. So they're hoping to take this to a real court, and they got the resources to fight this all the way. But I saw something interesting when I was in Vancouver. I saw a small, squalid, windowless courtroom. It was probably about 25 or 30 degrees in there. The clock on the wall was stopped, by the way, which I thought was so symbolic. Not only like it was stopped in the 1970s Maoist, Great Leap Forward, but also, you can't even run a show trial with the clock running. They didn't have enough seats. The temperature's too hot. These folks can't even run a proper show trial, and they think they can run Maclean's magazine and run our lives for us. I thought that was telling also. The courthouse was so jammed. There was a lineup, and so there's about 50 people milling in the lobby outside, and the kangaroos who were running the thing were so angry with that they had them dispatched. And I don't think they've ever had this kind of scrutiny before. I sat next to Terry Milewski of CBC's The National. I was near Andrew Coyne. The Globe was there. Someone from the New York Times was there for a day, which was amazing. I mean, when was the last time the New York Times went to a second-rank bureaucratic tribunal in Canada? Never. This kind of scrutiny, the kangaroos know they're being watched, and they know that if they convict Maclean's, that this massive bad publicity will continue for months or years, and frankly, it might be their death. And so even though every cell in their body, their entire political DNA is with the Canadian Islamic Congress, because, that's Muslims versus Gentiles at Maclean's, that's foreign-born people like Mohammed al-Masri against Canadians like Ted Rogers, that's the underdog versus the big rich corporation, that's, it's their perfect Marxist battle. So every cell in their body wants to convict, but, and here's the but, Rob, if they convict, it might mean the end of their censorship gravy train. And they might put their own survival ahead of their ideology, because every tyrant, at the end of the day, it's only about their survival. We've seen that throughout history. Yeah, it's about this ideology, Marxism or Nazism or whatever, but at the end of the day, no, it's about them surviving. So these three petty tyrants, I don't think they're listening to the law. I don't even think they understand the law. I don't think they're listening to the facts. I don't think they care. I think they know what to do, convict. But on the other hand, they know that if they convict, there'll be a lot of political pain, and their gravy train, these people who live off the taxpayers' teat, might come to an end. That's the decision they're making, because in fact, Mark Steyn really isn't on trial. These kangaroo courts are on trial. And the public, for the first time in memory, is watching. Even the public at the New York Times in Australia and overseas is watching. So I actually am going to make a prediction that Mark Steyn and Maclean's will be acquitted. Because then these three outrageously tyrannical kangaroo court judges can say, hey, everybody, you thought we were unreasonable. Look how reasonable we are. Sure, we put Maclean's to $200,000 in legal fees. Sure, we took up a week of the court's time. Sure, we chilled speech throughout Canada. Yeah, but at the end of the day, look how reasonable we were. We let them go. So all you folks out there in the media, stop paying attention to us now. Let us go back to work, and we'll pick on little people now. Folks who can't afford lawyers, who can't get the New York Times interested. We'll keep picking on the Pastor Stephen Bazans, who can't afford the kind of publicity. That's my prediction, Rob, is that these kangaroo courts will put their own self-interest ahead of their ideology, acquit Mark Steyn and Maclean's to take the political pressure off them.
You may be right. I guess we'll soon find out. In the meantime, much more, EzraLevant.com. Ezra, thanks for your time here tonight. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
All right. Ezra Levant on the line with us this evening. EzraLevant.com is the website. Much more there. Obviously, more on the Stephen Bazan case, so we'll talk a bit more about that. And, of course, the Maclean's hearing as well. Final arguments today. We'll see if Ezra's prediction holds true. And, there's certainly